My parents met when they were students in East Germany. At the time it was East Germany. This was well before the reunification. Both of them have studied medicine, so they are both medical doctors. So myself and my two siblings, we were all born in Germany. We lived there for 16 years. I mean, at least for me, it was 16 years. My mom is is half French, half Senegalese. Don't ask me how she ended up in East Germany. It does not make sense, but she found herself in East Germany. My dad is from Mali, and this is where they met. But I think for all those years, I mean, my childhood, yes, I have for sure some of the German characteristics because growing up in a German society. But my mother, more than my dad, was very peculiar of making sure that we don't forget our origins, you know, that we are from Africa and this is how we should be, you know, behaving. And it's not that we had to go to Africa every year for holidays. I mean, I went to Africa for the first time, I remember, at the age of 16. But we were raised that sharing is important, family is important, African culture, the respect for elders is extremely important. I mean, we were raised with African values, so when we went back, or when my parents had decided to go back to live in Africa after 16 years, it was very easy for us to integrate, you know, because we knew the values. I mean, even though we learned the language when we went back, but we could integrate very easily. I mean, they say that the eldest brother is always the one who gets the most rigorous parents. But I think, you know, every child in the family has his own ordeal and, through which he goes through. I mean, I cannot say that I was an angel when I was a younger child. So my ordeal was most likely well-deserved. So I had, you know, I think excellent parents, you know. I was a troubled child, but you know, I grew up, I have two other siblings, younger siblings. I think my parents were the hardest on me compared to the youngest one for sure. I think the one who followed me and myself, we had it almost equally. But we don't think it was, I mean, at the time for sure, we thought it was undeserved. Looking back, we think it was fully deserved. But, you know, and now we are parents ourselves. So I think I actually can say that my parents did a good job. That's the conclusion for me becoming an adult, and they raised us well. Even though that we did not grow up in Africa, we have an African mentality. We were not lost completely. So I can only thank my parents of what we have become. When I was flying home, I was flying to Mali for the first time, I didn't travel with my parents, I traveled alone. And my dad said, everything is arranged, don't even worry. And I was very surprised because when I landed in Bamako airport, I mean, in 1980, I can't remember, 85 or 86, my uncle, his younger brother, picked me up from the airport. I didn't even pass through immigration. I mean, it's almost like, you land somewhere, you know. I have not seen any police officer. They took me straight from the tarmac to the car. I handed him over my passport, and then I spent only 2 days in Bamako. And for the first time in my life, they have sent me to a village, African village, where I spent 3 months because my dad said I had to go and see my grandfather, since I'm the one who has never been on the African continent. So from a big city where you have electricity and running water in your house, I ended up in a village where the moonlight is your electricity and the water is the river. So, but you know, I spent 3 months there, summer vacations. I integrated into the local soccer team. You know, my grandfather one time came back and said, "What, do you know it's not dangerous to playing in the marketplace?" But I integrated very, very easily. But it's because the way how my mom, in particular has raised all of us. I think we were not happy when my dad decided that he wants to go back. I mean, after 16 years, I mean, we were technically European kids. I mean, even though we were raised as Africans, but we didn't know anything really better, you know. And our parents gave us a good life. They had a good job. I mean, they were both working in hospitals. I mean, we could go to any schools where we wanted to go. And I remember when our dad said that, okay, I think he has served long enough. Europe, I think for him, he got a government scholarship. I think it's time for him now to serve back his country. And I remember his boss at this time came to our house and had this discussion with him, and then he told him they have not trained him for Africa, they trained him for Germany, so he should stay. If it's the paperwork for nationality and so on and so forth, this can be all arranged, and he just didn't want to stay in Europe anymore. We even had a vote in the house to decide who wants to go back, and we all decided we don't want to go back because we didn't know Africa that well. But the decision we had made, I mean, he lost the vote, but he still decided that everybody goes back, so it was not necessarily helpful in terms of voting, but you know, almost like presidential elections, you know, where you know the winner is already known, even though he might not getting the majority. Anyway, I think he decided that we have to go back, so we all aligned ourselves. I think it became very clear after, you know, even though that we didn't want to go home, but after 1 year, and when I finished even high school, after 3 years, I think it was a good choice for us to go back. I mean, getting raised in Europe as an African and having at least living in Africa gives you a completely different understanding, you know, of the culture, of the social politics, the urban politics, the rural politics, you know, the way how people think, you know, relationships between people, much more warmer, you know. It's not just defined by materials in a certain way, you know. It gives you completely different perspectives. And you look at people who have not been that much exposed, might not necessarily having all the facilities, you know. You can see the hardship there. But when you look at their smile, and you look at the smile in Europe, you really hardly can make a difference to say who is more happy than the other ones, even though they don't have the same quality of life in a certain way. But we basically have learned that happiness is not necessarily always defined by the quality of life. I think it's more about the specific moments, you know, the things which touches you, it can make you happy. And the smiles are definitely the same. You will not see a different smile. You know, you can see it in someone in the village which have never even tasted electricity, and someone who has grown up in a city where, you know, power cuts is even unthinkable in a certain way. But the smile and the happiness is the same in a certain way. So I think my upbringing and raising for my parents, and my parents have never been, I mean, we cannot complain and say that they had not, but you know, my parents had their share of struggle even when they went back, but they stick together and they stick to the principle that they're not going back. Many of my parents who were also in Europe and decided to go back to Mali, after 1 or 2 years, went back to Europe again because they had the possibility, because they found it too hard. My parents stayed, you know. I mean, we can say today it was for the good reasons, but it wasn't because it was easy for them. They had their own struggles at that time. At the time when I was in high school, there was a system in place where if you're in your last year of high school, then the 3 best students in each sector, you know, you have science, you have literature, and so on, the 3 best are pre-selected for a national scholarship, government scholarship to study abroad. That was the time in Mali. I think the education system was also very good because government was paying for every education, so we are not My parents did not have to buy in Mali, for example, pencils, copybooks and so, because education was really promoted by the government. Mali was one of the non-aligned countries, so we were receiving scholarships from many parts of the world to send, a student outside. So I managed to be among the 3 best, and now I was dreaming where I would like to go. Now you have a child who was born in Germany, grew up in Germany, but maybe saying Europe is, you have lived it already, so you're looking at the other side of the Atlantic. So I said, okay, since I'm okay, I had some very good grades, so we want to make sure that I land in Canada or in the US. That was at that time, really the place where you need to be. Worst case scenario is Japan, and then we didn't think about Soviet Union at all, or worst, then I go to Germany, Europe, because I was born in Germany, so it should be easy for me to go back to Germany. Nothing of this happened, And this was one of the early days, you plan for things, things will be happening, you have worked very hard, and at that time, in fact, one of the distant cousins of my father used to be the Secretary General of the Minister of Education. So in principle, it should have given me a little bit of an advantage. Now, knowing my father, he will not be never asking for a favor. So I finished my high school and I got my high school diploma, which is called baccalaureate in French. So my dad came in, I drove with my dad to Bamako, and we met his cousin, one of my uncle. And he is then now promoting Soviet Union. He himself sending his kids to Germany, but me telling my dad that, and I'm pre-selected. It's not that it's made a favor. I mean, my name is among the pre-selection side. And I looked at these people and said, yeah, so Soviet Union, it will be. So I went to the Soviet Union, and when I was in high school still, I had a very hot temper. I was very temperamental, And the one thing which what the Soviet Union does, it teaches you patience. Because their system is, it's the first time you're away from your parents, you're on your own in a land where, even the alphabet is different, so you need to learn everything, So when we started learning Russia, for example, we were sitting in a class like elementary students, they were teaching us the alphabet. And it takes quite a lot of time. Even though that I didn't like it that much, I can only admit it was one of the best years in your life. Student life is always one of the best years in your life. And it was a fascinating country. Education is free. When we were there under communism, education is free. Healthcare is free. You have poor people, but you will not see poverty at the time. You don't have to worry about, because the state is really taking care of it. In terms of social responsibility from the states vis-à-vis their citizens, I think it can't be better. I think in more capitalistic societies, you will only see this in the army. But there it has been basically, spread to the entire society. Yes, you might not be finding everything what you want in the supermarket, but do you need everything what is in the supermarket? That's the different questions which you might not have all those choices, And within the Soviet Union, liberties were still there as long as you don't criticize the party, Everything else is the same as everywhere else. So it's really not. The one thing which will strike you though is that the surveillance systems, because they have secluded themselves from the world, so that is very, very clear. Everyone is watching everyone. But at the same time, it doesn't hinder people of doing what they want to do within the system in itself. But my biggest discovery was when I later on went to the US. And when I reached to the US, there was quite a striking resemblance between those two systems. Both the US and both the Soviet Union at that time, or Russia, were superpower. And for them, if you ask their own people, they will tell you there is no better country than their own. In the same way, exactly in the same way how an American will be speaking about the US, you will see a Russian or Soviet, and either by this time Soviet Union, will be speaking about the Soviet Union. You could not criticize their country in the same way. It's not very strikingly differently. The other similarity which you have is that when you look the news in America and you look the news in the Soviet Union at the time, same thing. You will only see things which is right around your corner. So it is a brainwashing about the two systems in exactly the same way. About different things, but still the same tactics in terms of indoctrinating you that this is the best country in the world and there's nothing which is better in this area. These are the two striking things which will exist. And you wonder if this is not characteristic, when you feel that you are above anybody else, because that's basically, and that's what's really a striking phenomenon when I lived in the Soviet Union. I lived in the US, and I started in the US in Tucson, Arizona. This is one of the very remote areas, of the US. But the attitude of the people exactly the same. You would just different language, different philosophies, but the way how they're talking about their country and the way how they're seeing the rest of the world, exactly the same. If I look back at my life, I would say not everything has been going as I wanted to be, as I wanted for me, or as I wished for me it would have happened. I had my own ideology of life in a certain way. But I must recognize that every single step that has been happening to me has been a wonderful lesson and has shaped my character in the way I am today. If you look at it professionally, I never wanted to be a medical doctor. Has never been my plan. I always wanted to be a pilot. Did not work out for one or the other reasons. Became a medical doctor, And it wasn't necessarily pushed by my parents, even though they were medical doctors. It worked out as it is. I never wanted to do public health. Now I'm doing only public health. It's still worked out for me in a certain way. The places where I have been working were never the places of my first choice. Let me put it this way. Maybe except one or two. But in every single country where I have been able to work, or every position which I have gotten, has been a very, very valuable experience for me, and it has helped me in my next steps to make things a little bit easier, even if I didn't want it necessarily to be there where life has basically brought me. So from very early on, I stopped making plans too much in advance. Yes, I do have objectives where I want to reach, but I got very quickly disappointed when you don't get what you want in a certain way. So, and yet you feel that whatever you have gotten was good for you, because it has helped you, grow within this organization, or has prepared you for the next organization or for the next job. So, yes, as a human being, we do have choices, but if you can manage what is given to you and make it better or work it out, for me, it has been always valuable lessons, so that it doesn't bother me anymore if, okay, yes, this is what I want. If I don't get it, I get somewhere else. Maybe it will be something good for something better in the future. That's the way how I'm looking at it right now. So as you said, whatever my parents have given us, whatever Mali has given me, whatever the Soviet Union has given me, whatever the US has given me, and all these other places where I've been working with, has made me who I am today. A very complex person who's trying to have a simple mind. I can compromise on objectives, but there are principles which I will not be compromising on. One principle is that I don't like to debate about money. Not that I have money, so it makes it easier for me, so that I don't have to debate about money. But I find money conversations very, very difficult and complicated. So I don't like to debate about money. And when I say I don't like to debate about money, I don't want to have a money issue between people which I value. So that one is, if I see people, their conversations only turning around money, I'm getting turned off quite quickly, because You know, yes, we know money is important, everybody needs it, but I think people who talk just about money, that's not the way how we have been brought up. And then family values, you know. A brother might be as bad as he might be, he remains still a brother. And, you know, we can disagree, we cannot like each other, but it is still a brother. And these are the principles. A lighter set of principles is that, you know, it's not maybe as strict as the two first one, but it's still something which is important for me, is that it's respect of each other's opinion, you know. I mean, everybody has his own ways of looking at life. I respect that, you know. In return, I also want the same respect back to me. You know, if I made a decision, it's not for arguing. It's as long as this decision does not impact you, you know, it's my decision. It is not your decision. It's not for argument. You know, so these are the three. I mean, I would say elementary. I mean, I'm sure that everybody has more, and maybe myself I have more. But these are ones are really the fundamental ones, which I would say to anybody. You know, I do not know if it's true, but I'm speculating is that a person who eats every day but doesn't have money, or a person who can eat every day to his hunger but does not have money, is not a poor person. But if you're hungry, you are a poor person. And that is why I think, you know, the countries who are doing very, very well, very, very well, or one of the preliminary, you know, human rights agendas on many, many countries was basically establishing food security. You will feel poverty if you cannot eat. But if you can eat, even if you don't have the money, I think you can strive and you can have the best. And that's, I think, which the communist system has basically put in place, that everybody is covered by the basic social services, and the basic of the basic is to eat every single day. You might not drive a car, you might not have a bicycle or a motorbike, you might not be able to go on vacation, but you don't have to worry about eating on a day-to-day basis. I think this does not make you poor. But if you cannot eat and your struggle is to eat on a daily basis, then poverty really kicks in. I mean, there are many instances in your life when you question humanity. When you grow up as a black child in Europe, you know, you will always have episodes where you question humanity, you know. Why do white people have more privilege than black people? When you grow older and you learn about, I mean, we have not lived through slavery, but if you look at slavery, you know, and justifications which people have given to slavery, even quoting the Bible or the Quran, that to justify slavery, you really would like to question, you know, humanity. You question humanity when you study World War II, World War I. You really question humanity in that sense. More recent war. When I was in the Soviet Union studying, my roommate was from Liberia. The war broke out while we were in the Soviet Union. You really question humanity at that particular time. The most recent event, COVID-19. Who would not question humanity when we have seen what has what has unfolded just because of flu, a pandemic? You know, the way how countries among themselves have behaved, people have behaved among themselves. You really question humanity. All the recent events, you know, in Gaza, you question humanity all the time. At the same time, you know, human beings have created magnificent, you know, wonderful things for humanity. You know, airplane, vaccines, you know, the internet, you know, you name it. There are certain things where we, you know, could make life better for everyone. And yet, any progress which should be making life better can also be utilized in another negative way as well. And maybe this is why humanity is actually struggling. You know, I think everything positive can be turned around into something negative, or can be used for something negative in the same way. And it's striking that people are more comfortable of, you know, utilizing the negative one, you know, in a certain way. let's face it, I mean, today, the real questions which we have, everybody wants to fund defense, Minister of Defense. Technically speaking, as now we are saying, in the US we have created the Ministry of War or the State Department of War, you know. And it's easier to fund that than to fund peace. And yet, you can only have progress with peace. You cannot move. So you really, you know, there are many ways how you can question humanity, but it's also humans who can bring humanity back. It's not the other way around. So it's, you know, it's only us who can bring humanity back. It is not, but for that, we need to be more human. Now that I'm from a certain age, you know, I'm way above the 50s now, you know. And when you're young, you think you will never reach there, but it comes faster as you think. And when you get 50, you know, there's a saying what they tell you when you're 20s, but you say, these people, you know, they're just jealous, you know. And it goes in French, they say, you know, if youth knew and if old age could, it comes with experience in a certain way. I mean, there are many things which you cannot control in life, and you need to accept that. You also need to understand that not everything in life is fair, even though you want it to be fair, and you have to accept it. You will not change it. You can fight it, for sure, but it takes also its toll. How do you move faster in a certain way? If I have to take one example, which I always will remember, is when I was in Liberia. At that time, I was still working as a medical doctor and a surgeon. We had a hospital, which was basically there. And we received a call at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, so 4 p.m., on a woman who had an ectopic pregnancy, which basically means is the pregnancy is not in the womb, it's outside of the womb, either in her tube or could be also in the abdomen. And she was already bleeding. And she was not in the same area where the hospital is, where we could do basically surgery, because normally for that to repair, you need to open and then take out the pregnancy, so you terminate the pregnancy, and then tie the vessels which have been ruptured by the pregnancy there. So the lady was about 8 hours drive from where the hospital was, and they called us on the radio. This was still at the time when there was, when we were posted in a rebel-controlled area in Liberia, because the entire country was not covered by the government, so you had government controlled in a rebel-controlled area. So they asked us if they can send the woman, because they have identified, so we trained some nurses there who did really perfectly their job, and say, this is an ectopic pregnancy, she needs to be operated, we cannot do it here, we want to send her to the stations where the hospitals where we were. And we had to tell them that they cannot travel because of curfew. So there were no travels authorized after 5 because of known government armed groups in those areas might be having, and we will not be exposing 5 people because of 1 person. So that was the decision which I had to make. So we told them what to do, but for us in a ruptured or in ectopic pregnancy, if it starts bleeding, you will not survive for 24 hours. So for us, we have given a death sentence to the woman because she couldn't travel, you know. So we told them to put on a drip, so perfusions, and put these different medications in there. And then early in the morning, they should tell us when they're traveling so that we will do the surgery the next day. In our head, so we were 2 doctors in this small town with a lot of nurses. We thought that in the morning they would be calling us that she has passed away. So at 6 a.m., they're calling us if they can start traveling. And I asked them, is she still alive? I said, yeah, but you told us yesterday it has worked perfectly. We just had the morning discussion. I said, okay. So put her on the car and come to Buchanan, where we were basically posted. So they left, they left around 7 o'clock, so they arrived 8 hours later. Not because the distance was long, it's just because the road is very, very bad. It's really through forest and so on and so forth. So they arrived by 3 o'clock. And when they arrived, everybody was smiling. She was still alive. She was very tenacious. And everybody thought now that she has reached the big hospital. We had a very good reputation, so she will be saved. So we took her blood, and her hemoglobin was very low. So putting her on an OR table, she would immediately die when we put anesthesia. So we need to find blood. For 2 hours, we could not find blood in the entire city. We could find blood, but not her blood type. And we had to decide to do an autotransfusion, which basically means taking the fresh blood in her stomach and then putting it back into the veins so that her BP goes up, basically. And that was the only solutions after 2 hours. In Kidus, we did that. As predicted, her hemoglobin went up, and then we went, scrubbed, went into the OR, and the anesthetist give her the anesthesia so that we can actually open up her stomach and then do the repairs. And as soon as he provided the anesthesia, she passed away. Now, someone who was supposed to be dying during the night did not die. She traveled 8 hours with her family mother, her husband, 2 nurses, and the drivers to come to Buchanan. She did not pass away during the trip. We looked for 2 hours for blood. We couldn't find. She is still alive. We were even speaking with her. And then when we gave her the anesthesia, she went. Now, I was a very young doctor at that time. And I have seen many deaths before, but I was not responsible. And we were standing. We did not even open her, so she was still intact. And we were standing there for 1 hour. And I can guarantee you, if at that time, there was a second door in the operating theater to get out of the hospital compared to the front door, all of us who were in this hospital would have taken this door to get out. After 1 hour, I was in charge of the hospital, but we had a more senior surgeon, Liberian one, national staff. He then said, okay, let's now go and talk to the parents. What do you explain to those parents or to the husband? So we called the husband into the doctor's office, and he spent another 1 hour with him to explain. And naturally, he was asking, you were there, you came here. Everybody talks about this hospital. Why his wife? None of us had a response to that. None of us. So we showed him the body, explained. After 1 hour, husband said, it is God's will. There is nothing what we could do at this particular point. He was resilient enough to accept very painfully, the particular situation. And from that moment on, Kiros, I always say, life is a very fragile thing. And while we might be doctors, we might be surgeons, it is still the Almighty who decides how long you will be on this earth, even if you're the best surgeon. There are so many confounding factors within this small little space that you need to be humble in what you claim your credit will be, because it can turn very, very quickly. And I think for me, I have many of these kind of situations where I have learned from, and which reminds me that, yes, you might think that you're saving lives, but you're just a helper in this world, because the decision might be somewhere else. I wish I could give you much more positive stories, but the positive stories, may boost your ego, but it doesn't help you to overcome when hardships really strikes you. And I think that is something which really has sit down for me for a very long time, that I'm nothing in this world. I'm accompanying other people. If I help them, there's still an upper hand behind there who makes it happen or does not make it happen, because it is all about circumstances in a certain way. And here, all the circumstances were aligned. And for us, it was already a miracle that she had passed the night. It was another miracle that she reached Buchanan. And it was another miracle that she spent 2 hours while we were looking for blood. But the outcome at the end is that this woman passed away. And that's the way how the husband put it to us, that at the end, it was her time. And I think in life, you know, if you can look at this from these perspectives, you will get less frustrated if you're going back to the earlier questions which you have mentioned. This is the type of questions which is so easy to say, but very, very difficult to answer. I would say, let's go back to what people have said before us. It's not coming from Abou, but it's just the basic. If you can wish to your neighbor what you want for yourself, this place will be a better place by tomorrow, not even in the next generation. If you can wish to your neighbor the same thing what you wish for yourself and act upon that, you will transform this world.